Hello, everypony. Nice to see you again. So today I'm going to be reading Awoken, which is the sequel to Rainbow Factory. So if you're like the squeamish type and can't stand cursing, violence, or whatnot, this story probably has it. So yeah, it might not be the best story for you. But regardless, Awoken by syn3rgy, or syn3rgy if you turn the 3 around, psychological grimdark, which is based on Awoken from Woodentoaster. It's based on the song, and is the spirited successor to Rainbow Factory, which means it isn't really a sequel, but it is at the same time, so yeah. Enjoy, I guess. That's all I can say. Or don't, whatever. What causes have I to feel glad? I've built my life on judgment and causing pain. The revelation had come to me rather spontaneously. A mere second ago I've been smiling at the ceiling, musing over the fact that I was one very lucky pony I was alive. For starters, I was alive and not down in the gloomy depths of the Rainbow Factory, shivering with fear and cold, pressed between panicked fillies and colts, choking on the gloomy oppressive misery that seemed to hang about its perimeter around the clock. But at what cost? The smile had left me then. It was that notion, a simple self-challenging question, which had suddenly made me feel insecure. Deeply perturbed, I let my mind wander idly, searching in vain for something that I could use in the defense of my reasoning. I thought back, way back, to the very beginning, when, like the new herd of flight school flunkouts that arrived every few months, I too stepped hoof in the ominous basement of the Rainbow Factory for the first time. I tried my best to block out the screams, but they're haunting me in my dreams. Please break my shackles, I want to stop. It was dark down there, and I had been lost to something far past fear. I had been petrified around me, like cattle to the slaughter. The flunkouts of flying school were being herded from the cramped hallway and out underneath the large dome roof. The air had been stale and stagnant. The metallic tinge of blood, heat, sweat, and bitter fear all came together at once to lace the still air. Screams of misery echoed off the concave roof, mixing with the whimpers of panic from my fellow failed classmates and the industrial noises surrounding us. Caught up in the flow of shuffling pegasi, I too had been pushed out of the hallway and into the biggest room with the domed roof. The first thing I noticed on entering was a large machine, cylindrical at the bottom but then tapering off far above my head. The stout top of the giant machine was surrounded by a gangplank, one which circulated around the machine once and then headed off in different directions. Assembled now was the rest of the herd. My gaze had followed along with the audience's up the side of the contraption, up to the circular gangplank. For a single moment there had been silence, or more so an absence of voices, where only the loud clang of hooves on metal could be heard. And then she appeared. At the time I had no clue of the gender, simply because the trim Pegasus above us had a full bodysuit on, and a hood to match. For a few seconds the Pegasus on the gangplank looked amidst the audience. Then she had spoken. I remember very clearly the first time I heard her voice. It was a rough, authoritative, vigorous with youth and subtlety, the drive to control. She'd given us a lecture on how worthless we were, the lowest of the low, the failures, and then she pulled back her hood. When I had seen the cyan face behind the masquerade, the flowing rainbow mane, a single thought raced through my mind. To this day I remember it. Was that Rainbow Dash? Rainbow Dash the filly? Rainbow Dash the loved one? Rainbow Dash the head of the weather control? Indeed it was. At that point in time my confusion had been the same as every pony else's. It was when she kindly treated us with an example that my confusion gave way to fear. The sort of fear one might feel when they were all alone in the ever-free forest, surrounded by flickering shadows and noises, chilled to the very bone. I clearly remember the mood of the crowd as one from our ranks was secluded and tied up with a set of chains that had descended from a pulley system above the machine. It was total panic. We had to get out, but where could we run? Where could we hide? The hallways behind us had already been excluded from the chamber by a set of sturdy wooden doors. I remember clearly having to sit there, unable to help, frozen in panic and despair as that orange-colored Pegasus was pulled up into the sky, given one last chance at being off the ground. For a moment, the colt had hovered over the top of the machine, wings fluttering in a manner that projected his burning desire to get away. He'd been struggling terribly, screaming for help, screaming at whatever he saw at the top of the structure. It had been probably the darkest minute of my life, then and the longest. My jaw had gone slack, and my heart had begun beating as fast as the dangling Pegasus' wings. And then it happened, the thing that both scared me beyond repair and filled me with something stronger than hate. The chains began to pull their captive in all directions, splaying all four hooves painfully apart. Then they began to twist, as if attempting to wring him out. Quickly the hollering of panic from the Pegasus turned to screeches of suffering as pain washed over him. A loud cracking noise, and then it was all over. The chains had broken his ribs, leaving him looking very similar to a rag doll. With a hiss, the clamps around the orange Pegasus' hooves opened. He fell lifeless into the top, where his convulsing body remained till it was grinded down into a bloody pulp. A humming had started up in the body of the machine. The turning of gears, an occasional puff of steam. My attention had been drawn down to a tube off to the side. It had been orange, if I remember correctly. It accompanied 6 others: red, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, the colors of the rainbow. After a bit, and to the audience's horror, 3 of the 7 began to vibrate profusely. Then gradually, a flow of according colors were spewed out into a dozen medium-sized vats. When the vats were full, a group of younger Pegasi, about my age at the time, shuffled out from the shadows and took them away. What came after the demonstration was nothing short of panic. The audience erupted, some flying into the air, others just straight out trotting, all looking for an exit, all failing in the end. Soon the riot had been returned to order, broken, hollow. I think it was about then that I realized there was no glimpse of hope left for me. I'm sick of hurting, sick of thinking it all I do. I break those around me. Those spared are very few. I rolled over in bed. My head was buzzing again, and my downy mattress had acted like a sponge. I was wallowing in my own sweat. The origins of my experience in the Rainbow Factory were nothing to be happy about. That period of time had really bucked me in the head. I gazed dully at the papers up on the wall of the bedroom. The tally chart, the statistics page, it all came to me in high resolution. Murder to me had become a statistic, I realized, something to be tallied and occasionally bragged about. To this day, I had directly partaken in ending 74 lives. The bloodstains no longer wash away from my hooves, no matter how hard I try. I man these wretched machines, day in, day out. The grinding wears on my brain, undermining my sanity, making me question my reality. Somehow it happened. I didn't die when all the odds were stacked against me. For weeks after my initial arrival to the Rainbow Factory, I was not picked to be drained. My jobs were many and gruesome, cleaning up the excessive blood that would overspill as the machine grinded up its victims, transporting the filled spectra vats to the holding chamber, cleaning out the grate where the access body parts went. Not nice stuff, to say the least. When I wasn't on the floor, I was in the holding chambers. Ironically enough, it was because of my containment in those filthy cells that I eventually ended up gaining my freedom. Let me explain. Though I've never really been told, I imagine that the reason why I ended up being drafted into the permanent working force at the factory was due to my aggressive nature, amplified 100 times over due to the living environment. At first, I fought only to defend myself and the food I was eating, but then I began to fight for the sake of fighting. I found that the longer I remained in this damn building, the angrier I got. Unable to take my rage out on any pony, the pressure just kept building up, till one dreary day I blew up and really hurt a younger mare. I lost practically all my friends then, and around that time, my wits as well. I had manifested into a monster. I started finding relief in harming others. First it was minor fights. Throw $2 and then call it a night. But then it turned into something more along the lines of brawling. I'd approach the weaker ones and beat them up, make them suffer in an attempt to dull my own misery. Many tried to flee. I wouldn't let them escape till they were bloody and begging. The ones that fought me suffered even worse infliction. One day, while I was on the factory floor, I killed a pony. It was my first murder. I clearly remember how the fight went. I was working with another Pegasus on moving some freshly squeezed batches of spectra to the holding chambers, and she had slipped on something, spilling the vat of indigo in the process. The commotion would have definitely put me next in the line on the chopping block. The fact that, after all this time, I'd been killed because of a stupid mistake drove me rabid with anger. The weeks and weeks of my emotional suppression came out in one explosive event. As the filly got up to say sorry, I hoofed her across the face. She flipped backwards, landing with a sickening crunch on her left wing. Her screams for mercy fell dead on my ears as I moved in and began pummeling her, using both my rear hoofs and my front ones to hit her repetitively. At one point, her shrill shrieking made me stop. It sounded very much like the noise that Orange Pegasus had uttered as he was being ringed out all those weeks ago. As quickly as the anger had come over me, despair, along with the realization of what I had just done, replaced it. Shocked and appalled, I fell to the floor and began crying. From my blurry vision, I seen the guards beginning to surround the two of us in a tight circle. But death didn't come. As the minutes passed by, I drew together enough courage to look up from the ground to the assembled Pegasi. The overmare's vibrant eyes glazed back at me. I felt my heart contract as a cold fear settled in. Shakily, I stood up, willing my hooves to support my teetering body. My body that was covered now in bloody indigo. In the presence of that sadistic hell pony, I felt small and insignificant. I asked her what she was going to do with me. She responded in her rough, authoritative voice with an answer I had not expected. "Kill her," she said, looking me in the eyes. In return, I looked back, willing myself to maintain the gaze. Her glittering orbs were velvet purple and stunningly beautiful. They reminded me immediately of the flowers that grew by my family's cabin. The beauty, though, was confined only to those rings around her pupils. The rest of her eyes had been eaten away by madness. They were bloodshot and burning with something I couldn't quite determine. Curiosity, maybe? Pride? Expectation? I couldn't put a hoof on it. I would find out soon. "Look into her eyes," she continued, smiling slightly. "Look and see the fear as you snuff out her worthless life. Do it now, and prove to me you're worthy my decision." I asked her what her decision was. She smiled secretly and then motioned with her chin at the sobbing Pegasus. "Do it now." She gave me her teaser. "And kill the bitch with this." I grabbed the device and put it on. After clicking the red button at the side of its smooth surface, the device came to life with a sparkling blue energy. Make her suffer. She shouldn't have gambled her life away. Put it in her mouth. It's the closest way to her brain. All my attention had shifted onto the heaving Pegasus beneath me. I didn't say sorry. I stared her in the eye, and there, surrounded by masked figures and a sadistic killer, I ended that filly's life by putting a taser down her throat. I don't know those eyes I see in the blood-stained chrome. I felt tense and uneasy. I couldn't stay in my bed. I had to move. I had to do something, anything. Getting up slowly, I parted the lately blood-stained covers and stumbled out of the bed, teetering momentarily and then stabilizing as I found my equilibrium. Dragging my hind hoofs, I made it to the washroom and clicked on the faucet, bringing my face down on the marble countertop. I washed the sweat from my mane and forehead. Momentarily my world spun as I looked up from the sink and into the mirror. What looked back at me was some pony I never really got to know. "You bastard," I murmured, attempting to stare down the other Pegasus in the mirror. I lost eventually and resigned to simply gazing hatefully at him. "You've made me do all of this. It's not me. I wouldn't have committed these atrocities." I was talking aloud now. My voice was becoming maniacal. Pegasus in the mirror did not respond to my accusations, choosing instead to smile mockingly. His eyes, they were purple like rainbow dashes. "No!" I screamed, rearing up and shattering the mirror with my hind hoofs. Shards of glass flew by me in a flurry, leaving thin graze marks and cuts all across my flank. "It's not—" I caught myself in the middle of talking to the wall. What am I doing? I have to get a hold of myself. This is stupid. I'm not going insane. I'm not. Yanking out a few larger glass shards embedded in my hoof, I walked back to the sink, and, taking a breath, I looked at the smooth chrome frame, the only thing that remained of the mirror. It was freshly speckled with my very own blood. There, amongst the red, and reflecting back to me on the metallic surface, was that Pegasus again. I would never escape him, I realized. I would never escape him because he was me. I slumped down in defeat and rested my chin on the cool surface of the sink. The grip of sleep came over me soon after. Yeah, so I'm sorry this is a little bit late. I forgot to put this outro on. So now that we have the outro on, I can edit out the spaces between, and then you should get it later today or tomorrow. So yeah, this is the outro to tell you about how I failed to put on an outro. So, anyways, the end.